Right, it says 11 o'clock on the clock, so we'll crack on. I have to start by reading out this statement. I am obliged to inform you that this meeting is being videoed. Members of the public are entitled to record the proceedings and are requested to give prior notice so that any additional measures that may assist can be put into place. Any member of the public who has any concerns should raise them now. Moving on. Item 1, apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillors Joyce Barrow and Steve Davenport. Item 2, disclosable pecuniary interests. Nobody seems to be indicating, so we'll assume there aren't any. Item 3, the minutes. They have been circulated. Any queries? Or everybody happy to support that we accept them? Right. Can I just have a show of hands? Oh, you're all right.
I was going to say have opposed, but
No, I think we're okay. Right. Okay, thank you very much. Item 4, public question time. I'm not aware of any. No. Item 5, member questions. I don't think there are any member questions. Item 6, scrutiny items. I'll ask Councillor Peggy Mullock to come forward and just present this scrutiny report.
Oh, sorry, but I'm fine. Where Peter's drink will not knock his coffee over. Morning, everyone. This report came about, actually, first started life at a corporate parenting meeting, where some of the officers shared some concerns that they had about how far we were having to send children out to Shropshire. So we decided to take it to scrutiny and had a task and finish group, and the result is the report that's in front of you. I think there's something we all need to remember here, that as councillors we're corporate parents of these children, and sending them miles away is not a very good idea. If we can have somewhere in Shropshire to go, we can work better with them and hopefully get them back with their families. The cost of having them outside the county, plus the cost of social workers being with them, is astronomical. Quite going that way because we've got that many children. But it's the children themselves. They're nearer to home. They're going to feel better, and they're more likely to work with us, with people that they know. And that's why we've come forward and we want to do this.
Right, okay, thank you. I don't know whether Councillor Nick Bardsley or Karen want to make any comments on it.
thank you, Leader. Only that I wholeheartedly endorse what the Task and Finish group has done. I think they had a very useful and constructive discussion. The Director and I are obviously working on a proper, fully worked up proposal, and depending on the size of it, that may or may not come back to Cabinet.
My understanding is that if it's agreed at Cabinet today that we accept this scrutiny report, that this will happen, providing it doesn't go above £1 million, which would then need to come to Council for the funding. But other than that, is that right, Karen? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, David.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'll be very brief. I just want to echo what Nick has said. I think this, I really welcome this report. I think it's a brilliant piece of work, and I'd like to congratulate the Scrutiny Committee and the Task and Finish Group on their work. And if you want somebody to move that we adopt this, then I'm happy to do that.
Councillor Hannah Fraser.
Thank you. I also think this is an excellent proposal, and I think the Scrutiny Committee has done really well in bringing it forward and highlighting, an excellent piece of work that's going to not only serve children better, but save a significant amount of money as well. I wanted to say that for several years the council was wedded to a kind of ideological commissioning, outsourcing approach, and this is an example of where actually now a solution can be provided with a different approach that's much better, and I hope it heralds an approach by the council that is much more looking for the right solution for the right problem, rather than an ideological adherence to insourcing, outsourcing, whatever. Thank you.
You'll be aware that I often talk about cultural change, and I think it is part of the cultural change I'd like to see happening. Well, it is starting to happen, you know, and I think it's the right way forward for the council, you know, to be more flexible. And actually, it's a good example of the way I envisaged overview and scrutiny going forward on this council, because when we started 18 months ago or 15 months ago, whatever it was, there were challenges to how many scrutiny or panels there should be and what should be, but I think it is now starting to work quite well. It's taken 12 months for the system to bed in, but now this is showing how it can actually help the overall way the council goes forward. So I welcome your report and thank you for everything you've done on that. Right, so we've got the scrutiny report. Is everybody supportive of it? Can I see all those in favour? Right, so that now will happen then. Right, thank you. Item 7, Annual Treasury Report. Councillor Minery.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I will be very brief with this one. Everybody knows what this is by now. I would just like to draw attention to paragraph 1.2, right at the very beginning, and point out in excess of £1.5 million that was generated successfully by managing better than we had forecast in the first place. But it is what it is. It's a statutory requirement we report annually, and we are doing so. The report is for noting rather than action.
I'm happy to second it. Any comments? No? Right, again, can I ask you just to show? Apparently people do actually watch the video of our cabinet meetings, you know. Item 8, Treasury Management Update, Quarter 1. Councillor Minery again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We're now on to the current year, distinct from the previous one, which was the entire year. It's the same story, I'm happy to say. Additional income of £74,000 so far from the investment work. Again, this is a report for noting rather than action. But I suggest we do.
I'm happy to second it. Any comments? No? Right, can I just see those in favour then, please? Thank you. Item 9, Financial Monitoring Report, Quarter 1. Again, Councillor Minery.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I doubt this one will pass through quite so painlessly as the previous two. This is the, as the title says, Financial Monitoring Report for Quarter 1. And you can see, everyone can see that the year has started off at variance from how it was expected to start off. There are some recommendations which are on page 54 of the pack, on the second page of this actual report, A, B and C. So the recommendations are that we note that at the end of Quarter 1, the full year revenue forecast is a potential overspend, and I do the word potential. B is to consider the impact of this on the Council's general fund balance, which quite honestly would be to reduce it below the point at which we would find to be acceptable. And C, to note that the budget environment as detailed in Appendix 2 has taken place at Period 3 to allocate pay award funding that had not been distributed at budget setting due to the value of the pay award not having been agreed at that time. So those are the three recommendations, Leader. I will leave it to colleagues to answer any questions on their individual portfolios, but in general terms, I would just say that this is clearly disappointing. And I will sort of advertise a comment that I'm going to be making on Thursday in my annual report to the Council, which is that in conjunction with James, we've decided that we need an overall thorough review of the base budget. It's one thing for in any one particular year to start off the year and suddenly find that it's going adrift, but this is happening too often, so I think we do need a thorough overhaul of the base budget, alongside the work that's going along with the digital transformation, so that next year we might have a little bit more confidence in the figures that we're approving in February. But I'll leave it at that for the moment.
I'm happy to second the report, and I would just make a comment that this time last year, I think the figure was saying 5 million.
It was,
and we did resolve that. I don't think it'll be quite so easy to resolve it this year because we keep squeezing and squeezing. but I'll be very surprised if the actual at the end of year figure is anywhere near this sort of figure. We will catch up a lot of the money one way or another. Alan was first, then Hannah.
Oh, interesting. I've got last year's report on my screen at the moment, and it was actually 4.188 million, so not quite 5. And this is the highest projected overspend that I can recollect being reported. And given the low level of reserves that's also reported in this document, it must give rise to concerns, not just potentially disappointing, but potentially disastrous, set against what you said, that everything is more and more difficult, set against the report on the AMBER savings that are in here as well. It does lead to questioning about whether or not what's being proposed about the base budget is a panic reaction to the situation that we find ourselves in, and to suggestion that we may well be getting to a point where we're like other authorities, like Northamptonshire, where we are not going to be able to make ends meet in the future. We'll have to declare very difficult circumstances. More and more counties, as we read, are getting near to this. And I fear that this heralds very, very serious and significant problems for this authority. And I would ask you to confirm that, in your view, we're not in the same situation as other authorities who are really in dire straits related to their ability to make way and balance the books in the future.
I can give you an assurance that I am confident that this council will balance its books over the next 2 or 3 years. I think it's the 3rd year that becomes one of the issues, but we are doing everything we can to make sure we've got that under control. We are nowhere near any of the financial difficulties that some of the other county councils have got. But as with all councils, there are pressures, and there always will be pressures on our budget, and we will do everything we can to resolve them. Hannah.
2 issues really for me. Firstly, quite a lot of the deviance in the budget is really to do with delays in actually delivering savings that can be achieved. It just seems to me that there's an awful lot of, yes, it will happen, but not yet, or it was supposed to happen last year and it might this year, or maybe it will be next year. And that if we can make these savings, that's safe going forward, and that I've never been particularly convinced that every effort is being made to deliver the savings as soon as possible. You know, is there some inertia here that actually a bit of a root and branch look at how we go about actually delivering savings might help with? The other aspect is I have real concerns over the Children's Services budget, which faces significant pressures continually and always has red-rated savings. My feeling, having sat on the scrutiny committee for this for some time, is that some of the savings in Children's Services now is the department that has looked as hard as any other department at actually delivering savings. I think that some of the savings now are perhaps a bit of a fantasy, and should the council actually say we need to set a budget that's realistic, that we're not always falling behind on, because the public has said in a big conversation they expect these services to be children's schools and looked after children. They expect them to be funded properly, and they don't expect those services to be cut to the point where our children actually suffer. So I think in the root and branch base budget setting, the council needs to be extremely careful that it's not setting that budget too low. And I think at the moment the budget is set too low, and to expect that department to deliver some of the savings that it's being expected to deliver when they've not been delivered in the past. You know, school transport would be an example of one of those. I think we need to have a proper think about what our children need and deserve, and make sure it's funded properly.
Councillor Nick Bardsley.
Thank you, Leader. Two things really. First of all, actually some of the savings are being delivered, not all of them. We'll be getting reports on the transport issue, and I'm actually much more optimistic than I was a month or so ago. I think officers have worked extremely hard, and actually those savings were and are entirely realistic. What I think we are seeing, and it's very much a feature of the last 6 months, the last 12 months, is entirely unexpected growth in demand. The headline figures are that a year or so ago we had 280, 290 looked after children. Now we're moving around sort of 350, 360. Now that is a 20% increase in the numbers of looked after children, but of course it's not just the numbers of looked after children, it's all the other pressures on the other services that the Director is responsible for. And frankly, I don't think anybody could have predicted that. It's not something that's affecting Shropshire alone, it's affecting many other areas, and it's something that we've got to address. But I don't, in fairness, think that's a fault of budget setting, because, you know, back in the middle of last winter, I don't think anybody could have predicted the growth in demand that we're now experiencing.
So that's partly where the overspending, the potential overspend comes from. It's partly the pressure in children's services, and it's partly the pressure on potholes and highways, you know, so that's why we've ended up where we are. But yeah.
Just to come back on that, my comments weren't a criticism at all of the savings that are being delivered, or of the way that the things are actually being run. It's more a question of, given that there are additional pressures because of extra demand, are you going to ask the department to find that money from within itself, i.e. something has to come from educational services or somewhere else to help pay for that demand, or are you actually going to say that needs to come from somewhere else within the council? Because to my view, you shouldn't be funding the increase in demand for children's services from within that department if that is to the detriment of other children.
I understand the comment, and it's a conversation that will need to take place. But the pressure across the whole council, you know, do we take it from adult social services, or, you know, how much can we squeeze out the highways budget anymore? So that conversation has got to take place. But we will do everything we can to protect children's services, as we always do. You know, we've got good ratings on everything we do with children's services, and we intend to carry on in that way.
Can I just make a comment, Steve? And I echo that, and I think that it's long been the priority of this council to make sure that vulnerable people are protected. And that is actually one of the main drivers for the budget review. It's not a panic reaction to the fact that we are forecasting an overspend for the year. The thinking has been for some time that we needed to do this, because there is something adrift in the process of the thinking, the methodology that's ending up year after year with this situation. And yes, nobody could have predicted that level of growth in the number of looked after children. But nevertheless, we are aware that nationally this is a trend, and we do need to make sure that when we're putting amounts of money aside, that they are more accurate than they currently are. And the question as to where that comes from, of course, is not for me alone, but we do have some ideas. If I just pick up on the comment made a little bit earlier about the commissioning that you made, and the leader has answered, and absolutely right. My experience over the years has been that neither of the ideologies actually work on the ground. Sometimes it is better to do it yourself, sometimes it is better to put it out. The key thing is that we're getting value for money every time we do something, and if we can operate whatever it is better within, then that's what we need to do. And again, in the annual report, you will see some reference to commissioning, and that's the work that is going to be undertaken on that. Into that.
Okay. Alan?
Some of the medium long-term forecast is predicated on returns coming from very substantial capital investments. And I just wonder if you could give some indication whether those are going to reach fruition. I'm thinking in terms of the purchase of the shopping centres in Shrewsbury. I'm thinking in terms of the IT transformational programme, some of which I see in the press is falling behind schedule. Think about the accommodation strategy. I mean, are these things which are medium term going to satisfy or meet the targets that were set for them specifically?
I think we set some very ambitious targets. I think we will deliver them, but it is taking longer on one or two things. As you say, the digital, 3/4 of the programme is well on track. There's a quarter that is slipping a little bit. Michelle's here if you need details. But we're reasonably confident that we will get that back on track. One of the problems is we face this dilemma. We're trying to run a really tight organisation, so we haven't got as big a staffing structure as existed in the past, but we're trying to do just as much work with less people, and so sometimes things do take slightly longer. I have to say I've been putting the chief executive under pressure over the digital savings as well, you know. I mean, that's just part of the process. You know, we do keep the pressure on. We are trying to drive this organisation pretty hard, but sometimes things do take slightly longer, and this was acknowledged in the peer review that went on last year. You know, there are some that will take longer to deliver than others. We're hoping that they will all come through, and we will, well, we're not hoping, we're determined they will come through. We'll make sure we get the savings. In terms of the accommodation, a report will be coming shortly on the accommodation, and we do hopefully will crack ahead with that pretty quickly, because I think that's something that does need doing sooner rather than later, and that will produce savings for the council. So there are there's lots of things going on. We're pretty confident we're going to get where we need to be. This is about, you know, let's get back to where this is the financial monitoring board. This year's finances. It is predicting a potential overspend. I'm determined we won't be anywhere near that figure. I'd like to be on naught, but I can't promise that because there are pressures, but we'll be as near to naught and a balanced budget as is possible.
I don't want to drag on things too long, but there's one other point that hasn't been answered, which was made right at the very beginning by Alan, which was the size of it in comparison to the forecast gap last year. What the report doesn't make terribly clear is that around about 2 million of that gap is actually relating to the pay award, which was approved by council in the summer. Now we actually know how we're going to fund that, but because that funding hasn't come through council yet, we can't include it in the report. So there is 2 million of that is already been dealt with. I just wanted to make that clear.
Right, any other comments, or are we happy with the report? Can I see all those in favour then, please? Right, thank you all very much. We move on to item 10, revised minimum revenue provision statements. Councillor Minory.
It's me again, yes, Leader. This is a complex issue, actually. This is all to do with the way we deal with the debt of the council, with the repayments, how it's reflected in the accounts. And periodically it's reviewed, and it's not reviewed internally, it's reviewed with the help of external experts. And it's been said to us that in order to be prudent, it would be perfectly appropriate for us to review the policies. And there are a number of options. In fact, there are an awful lot of options which are set out on page 90 of the pack, paragraph 6.3 in the report. Lists from option A down to option C4, all of which have varying consequences on the budget as we move forward. But after a lot of deliberation, we've actually opted for C3, I think it is. That has a positive effect on the annual budgets, but you'll see from the report that despite what we've just been talking about, having this potential Indian deficit, we're not actually going to contribute this saving towards that. Instead, we're going to intending to use it to help out with the digital transformation programme in order to avoid further borrowing. Either myself or James will attempt to answer any questions that members may have. As I say, it is extremely technical. It's the sort of thing that you need to go and sit and read in a dark room, really. Anyway, the recommendation, if I just find it,
Page 88.
recommendations are top of page 88, and there are 3. To consider that the various options that are contained within the report, and to approve the use of option C3, and to approve that the saving thus generated be ring-fenced to fund the digital transformation project. Those are the 3 recommendations.
Happy to second it. I just want to make sure I'm understanding with James exactly what it's saying in 2.3. That's just for the coming year. So what will the savings be used for afterwards? That will just go into the general? Or are you suggesting it's every year for the digital?
Thank you, Chair. The requirement for 18-19 is to build it into the digital transformation programme on the basis that we're implementing that. From 19-20, there will still be some costs associated with digital transformation that will need to be paid, so we'll need to consider that as well. But then from the 2021 period onwards, there's the potential to consider that as a base budget saving. But until we get there, we don't want to
So
continue any use of
doing it a year at a time. Next year we put it to digital, and then we'll consider, I suppose this time next year we'll consider where we are. And
That's right.
okay. Right, okay. Alan?
Does this mean that the estimates for the cost of the digital transformation programme are now 2.2 million higher than was originally set, or is this just a difference in the way in which that cost is going to be financed?
No, it's a try. No, this is just purely the financing of it. We were originally going to be borrowing. The council had some money that it saved, which was put in the pot, and the rest of it was going to be borrowed. So this is just reducing the amount that we need to borrow to keep the cost of the interest charges a little bit lower.
Can I just ask, wouldn't it be, I mean, I'm looking at, just going back to finance.
Probably better if you use the mic.
Sorry. Just going back to the financial report, notice that there are problems with the general fund balance, that is very low at the moment, and reduced almost half, projected on to the 31st of March 2019. Wouldn't it be better to put something in that rather than refinancing something that's already been
I'm
settled?
taking the professional advice we're being given.
Well, there is confidence within within colleagues that actually the bulk of that projected overspend won't happen, and therefore we have the comfort, I suppose, of using it in this particular way, because we're reasonably confident that by the end of the year the reserves will be back to where we expected them to be because of actions that will be taken. But there is always the option, Peter, as we get nearer to the end of the year, to reverse or change that and actually take that saving because we needed to improve the general fund and borrow as we originally intended to do. But at the moment, that's the thinking and that's the reason behind it.
I would take it as a sign of confidence in our revenue situation rather than the opposite.
Well, it's a question of whether that confidence is just in the mind or in some sense of reality, and if it is well-founded. And that's what I'm concerned about, because it does say here that once the savings for the pay award have been reflected, the balance is still only 10.5 million as opposed to 15 million, which is quite low anyway.
We're sure we'll get it back to
Time will tell me about.
Yeah,
I'm
it
just
is.
concerned about the consequences of all this overconfident, ambitious, pie in the sky, things flying all around the place, that seems to pervade this cabinet at the moment.
I don't agree with the word you just said, and we're very confident that we know where we're going, and we will deliver all the savings and a good revenue account balance for the next 2 or 3 years.
Peter, I seem to recall the same things being said 12 months ago, and we ended up with an underspend.
Yeah, yeah. Right, there are recommendations at the top of page 88. Unless anybody's got anything else to say, can I see all those in favour? Right, thank you very much. Item 12, so it's somebody else's turn. Annual customer feedback, complaints, comments and compliments. Oh, have I missed one? Sorry, Q1 performance report, Councillor C. Chalmers.
Same person, different paper.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Leader. As ever, the performance report for this quarter. the paper lays out the highlights and a few things to work on as it does every time. If I just pick out a few which are highlighted for your attention. Delayed transfers of care has improved significantly, and we're now in the top quartile in England, which has got to be really good news for us. Permanent admissions into residential care has turned out better than the expected profile. So again, a tip of the hat, as they say, to my colleague over the far side of the table. I think last month or last year, whichever way you want to look at it, we highlighted a spike in people killed in our roads, and that there is a piece in the paper which extrapolates that and explains, as I did at the previous cabinet, that it's not that there's a spike in people dying on our roads. The roads aren't any worse, if you take out the potholes, obviously, than anybody else's, but it's just the fact that the way the police now record those deaths on our roads has meant a change in the figures. I know my colleague and the Minister of Fun over there wouldn't let me escape without highlighting the continued success of Theatre 7 and the Old Market Hall, which has now seen their annual attendance go over 250,000, which is a hugely significant number, I think, in the for the service to achieve. And obviously, if we move into the museum service, a happier note to end on. There's a correction to the paper. It says that the Lego exhibition numbers of 13,000. Those didn't actually include the online sales, which will push it up to near 18,000. So I think this proves my ongoing point that exhibitions such as Lego are definitely something to build on.
Hannah?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of comments. The first being the last time I was at Cabinet and we had a similar report. I made the comment that the council doesn't, in any of its metrics on the online portal, measure any environmental statistics or anything to do with the environmental performance of the county or of the council. And there were murmurs around the table that yes, that would be a good idea, and nothing really has been done about that. Although I do notice there are 2 new reports on their way about improving the efficiency of the council and commercial operations. So it clearly can be done, but obviously not for the environment. So the environment doesn't appear to be a priority particularly. There was some issue around what sort of measures might the council meaningfully measure. You could have the percentage of energy efficient homes in the county, you could have the amount of off-grid generated energy in the county, you could have the number of bus journeys, you could have the number of cars entering market towns. You know, there are a myriad of things that could actually monitor the environmental performance of both the council and the county. And I think this council should grab the bull by the horns and start doing this. There are numerous benefits that fall out to economy, to health, to well-being, of being much more environmentally aware, more conscious of how we use our energy and of how we do transport, particularly in this county. And I think Cabinet should have a rethink about how prioritising some of these issues will actually deliver benefits to health, well-being, air quality, economic progress, economic growth, and other such things. That's the main point really. I had a couple of questions over one of the metrics on the portal, the number of referrals that are repeat referrals into children's services. There was a big spike in April 2018. Is there an explanation for that? Is it just a data blip, or was there a problem with repeat referrals there? And 2017 and 2018, street inspections for Daybury is we're currently at a poor status for failing street inspections for Daybury, which is perhaps a reflection of a loss of funding in this department, but could someone please comment on what's happening to improve that?
Right, Karen, repeat referrals for children's services, any comments?
Yes, Chair, thank you. That was a bit of a spike in April. We are seeing those come down, but they are higher than they have been in the past, so they are very much subject to scrutiny at the moment.
Right. I don't know if we've got anybody here from Highways.
No, we haven't. The portfolio holder's not here. We haven't got a director in place. There are no officers, so we'll provide a written response on that one if that's acceptable.
Okay. Right.
And share my comments on the environmental performance monitoring.
On the environmental side of it, yes, Hannah, you did raise it at the council. Obviously, this report has been put together, and the stats are obviously live stats. It is something that we're constantly reviewing, and you can have whatever stats you want on there, but it's how you read them. But it's something we're reviewing on what goes on there environmentally. It is one of those things which we're still looking at. Hasn't gone live yet, but we're considering it and evaluating what stats are recorded.
There are some comments in item 8 about resilient communities which talk about, a clean and attractive environment and volunteering and various issues, and 8.1 is recycling and composting. So we haven't completely ignored it, but I get what you're saying, and we are under pressure. We are driving an organisation that hasn't got masses of staff sitting there waiting for a job to do, so it does sometimes have to take longer than you would expect.
My comment on that is really that this requires a change in thinking, perhaps more than anything else, in that some of these measures need not cost very much, but that there would be real benefits to delivering a slightly different way of doing things. And I think the council just hasn't got its head in the right space at the moment in terms of environment.
I'm not quite sure I agree, but anyway, we'll let that roll. Right, anybody else? Oh, yeah, sorry, Michelle, please.
Thank you, Chair. It is also connected to the corporate plan and the measures that are in the corporate plan, and we are currently undertaking a review of the corporate plan, so it's something that we will pick up there.
Okay, right, so we've had plenty of debate. Everyone happy to accept the report on the annual customer feedback? Right, all those in favour? Right, thank you. Now we get to item 12, annual customer feedback. Right, Councillor Charnley.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Again, along similar lines to the previous report, this is the customer feedback, and it captures all the compliments that the council gets and the odd complaint, no doubt, as well. I'll simply move the report. There's one line that stands out in there, which is the highways and street scene one, which obviously with the winter we've had and the plethora of potholes which we're now working our way through, I suppose that is predictable, but I move and take questions.
Right, Councillor Mosley, and then Hannah.
I take it Councillor's comments about compliments and a few complaints was tongue-in-cheek, because of the report said 51% of all customer feedback, which is increasing rapidly in recent years, comprises complaints, and only 25% are to do with compliments. Just for the record, Chair.
Councillor Hannah Fraser.
Thank you. I think there's a real issue with communications over complaints. Quite a lot of what comes into my inbox on this issue is really about people feeling that they haven't had an answer to something, that nothing has happened as a response. But I also found it myself as a councillor. I ask residents to tell me if the problem has been fixed, because I know that most of the time I won't be told whether or not the problem is being considered or being fixed. There are a lot could be done with just every issue that is fixed, particularly in highways where there's quite a lot of small issues to do with litter, debris, blocked drains, things needing cutting back. The right people with the right tools just to send a very quick email saying this has been done would solve an awful lot of problems. There's a big spike in complaints around highways and street scene, and I think a lot of that is to do with people just not knowing. I've had 2-3 cases of issues to do with highways and drainage, and I'm sure this is across the board, that have just taken months when they should have taken weeks, or weeks when they should have taken days. And if people know what's going on, then they don't have the same issue. So I think part of it's to do with service delivery, but an awful lot that's not really about service delivery is about people just knowing whether or not something's been done and is being actioned. And that shouldn't be too expensive to fix.
Okay, Councillor Chalmers.
I think just coming back to that, and I think your point is very, very relevant, Anna, and I agree with what you're saying. Historically, I think the way the council works, it's not always as simple as it should be to get a response to a question, whether it be from the public or whoever else. And one of the main strands of the digital transformation programme is to improve that system and automate responses as and where they're appropriate, whether that be feedback or just a response saying your email has been acknowledged or whatever it may be. So I'm confident that that will be addressed as part of the ongoing transformation. And I also think that the customer feedback report itself will probably reflect that in future years. It probably it'll be a more accurate picture of what we're getting, or reflection of what we're getting through the system, hopefully. So I take your point. Hopefully it'll be addressed going forward.
Okay, any other comments? Right, can we accept the report then? Let's see all those in favour. Thank you very much. Item 13, application by Broseley Town Council to be considered as a neighbourhood plan area. It will be presented by Councillor Rob Macy, and I'm sure Simon Harris, the local member, will have something to say as well. I'm David Jones. Right.
Thank you, David. The item in front of you is seeking approval. We've had a number of these through from our local communities. This one seeks cabinet approval for the parish area of Broseley to be formally designated for the purposes of a neighbourhood plan. Just as with previous reports, for clarity, this is not our approval for any content of the plan, but just for them to be able to prepare one. It represents the first step in the preparation of the neighbourhood plan, which will be adopted. If adopted, will become part of the statutory development plan for the area alongside the local plan that we're preparing ourselves as a council. It's the town council that are taking the lead on this, but they've established a steering group, but it's our role to formally designate the area that this plan will cover. We're required to undertake the consultation, a 4-week consultation, which took place between August and September, to which we only received 2 comments, and neither of which were making any objection to defining this as the area for the plan. From our point of view, the plan area mirrors an existing administrative boundary, so that makes things more straightforward as well. So we think that is appropriate to be considered. From our point of view, we will also provide support to the steering group, which includes through evidence collection and site assessment work. In due course, it will be particularly important that the neighbourhood plan and the emerging Shropshire local plan complement each other, and it's likely that the timescales for preparing both will run in conjunction. So with that, there's 2 recommendations in the paper, and I move the report.
Right. Do you want to comment? Either of you, don't fight.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of things. I've got 5 minutes. That was already explained to me.
I didn't say you had to take 5 minutes.
Broseley's Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group got together last November, and we decided we had a look at maybe expanding the area up into Bentle area, seeing as though they use our town. We held a public meeting which was part of the LJC, which was extremely well attended from all over the town, and they went away to the Barrow Parish Council and rejected the new town boundary, which held us back a couple of months while we went back to the Broseley people to discuss if the town boundary should stand as it is, and it has been agreed that the town boundary does stand as agreed. We've since then had a number of other public meetings, and we've actually had a consultation paper go out, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The meetings that we have now in Broseley are extremely open, and one of the things it is going to allow is for portfolio holders and officers to come and make and sit around and listen to the way that the Broseley people are thinking and the way they want the town to progress. It's also apparent that there are a number of people in the town with quite loud voices, and they do need to be heard by these portfolio holders. One of the reasons why we did look at changing the boundary slightly is because of the way that the sill boundary is. And when we get round to that particular subject, I'm hoping that the portfolio holder will make a visit to the town. Finally, I just want to talk about some of the results we've found in the consultation, because it actually sits around with everybody around in this room today. 59% who expressed an opinion agreed strongly with the idea of allowing small development of affordable housing for rent to be built outside the development boundary. 95% of people agreed that the priority should be given to local people. 68% of people thought that no more land in Broseley should be allocated for development of industrial use. Don't know how that's going to stand. 88% expressed an opinion, thought that the present mix of shops and business in Broseley was about right for the town. 77% of residents agreed strongly that if facilities are at risk and it was easier to deliver the services through the town council, we should consider this and include funding for this to be put through the town council precept. Okay. The most highly valued green spaces in the town are the Haycock Birchmeadow Park and the cricket field. The Birchmeadow Park, its centre, the Victoria and Library, are the most popular amenities in the town and are used by over 60% of the respondents. Almost 80% of the respondents use the town's health centre, and 7% agreed strongly that it offered a high quality service. And lastly, 98% of those people who express an opinion are broadly satisfied with the education and childcare provision in our town. And I think that is something that this council should be quite proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to speak?
Thank you, Leader. I'm going to ask 5 minutes. I probably won't take 1 minute. Broseley Wood Wards falls within my Much Wenlock division. As a Shropshire councillor representing this small and attractive part of Broseley, which comprises around 50% of the conservation area, during the recent consultation I confirmed my support for the civil parish of Broseley as an appropriate neighbourhood area. I'm impressed by the enthusiasm that local volunteers have been able to attract in embarking on this ambitious project, and I have little doubt it will be a great success in shaping future development in Broseley. Will the portfolio holder please demonstrate his support for this important project by visiting the town to see one of the consultation events as they unfold in the coming months, please? And will you also be mindful of the harm to this endeavour that might be caused by significant changes to Shropshire Council's community infrastructure levy arrangements? Thank you, Leader.
Still, the community infrastructure levy is being discussed actively as we speak, and there are likely to be changes which I hope will benefit the local communities. But Councillor Macy.
From that point of view, thank you to both of the councillors and local members. I think the issues which you've highlighted already in the feedback reinforces that need for a complementary approach between our two authorities as this goes forward. But obviously, the exercise that you're doing is already throwing up, it's a really great exercise in terms of throwing up local information and what's valued and the other things that can determine development going forward. And certainly in terms of the attending a consultation event, I'd be happy to attend one of those in the future. And obviously, yes, we will keep that in mind with the wider implications on other policies related to development.
Any other comments? There are recommendations on the bottom of page 133. There are 2 recommendations. Can I see all those in favour, please? Right, that's clearly agreed. Right, thank you all very much. That's the end of the meeting.